Hello, I'm Daniel Lader, founder of Lader CPA and Associates, and welcome back to our Instagram Live series, where we are building a successful private practice from beginning to infinity. Welcome back, everyone. Why don't elephants become accountants or therapists? Because every time there's an issue, they never forget it. And they charge by the ton of emotional baggage. All right, so this week we are going to be talking about the differences in tax strategies related to hiring contractors or hiring employees. This is a crucial step as you expand your private practice. You'll learn, once you get busier, you'll soon learn that you can't do it all. And hiring someone to help you with administrative stuff or hiring additional therapists, that will greatly expand your ability to grow. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, first off, when you were thinking about hiring someone, it's the main question comes down to, are you hiring an employee or a contractor? And you might think, why does this matter? Well, the IRS cares very, very much. And that's part of why it matters. Let's talk about the other things too. So first, let's talk about contractors. Now, I'm sure you know a contractor is someone who comes in, you pay them a set amount for whatever work they do, and then that's basically the end of the relationship. So let's dive into that a little bit more and see what that means and how it can be a tax strategy and benefit to have contractors. First off, the pros of hiring a contractor. There are no payroll taxes that you have to pay. You save quite a bit of money that way. You also don't have to worry about paying any kind of benefits, health insurance, retirements, paid time off, none of that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about it with a contractor. When you have a contractor, it's a very simple setup. All you do is pay them, and at the end of the year, you file a 1099 to report how much you paid them, if you paid them more than $600. And that's it. Having a contractor lets you be, a contractor is more flexible than an employee. You are not responsible for the hours they work or the methods they use to perform that work. So those are the positives. Let's talk about the negatives, because you can't have positives without the other side of the coin, the negatives. First off, there is a risk of misclassifying an employee as a contractor. The IRS would prefer to see you having employees instead of contractors. And if you're misclassifying someone and they should be an employee instead of a contractor, the IRS can assess penalties on that. And they're not cheap penalties either. Also, we listed this as a benefit, but it's also a con. You don't control how that contractor works. All you get to see and all you get to control is the final product. You don't have the control over what goes into that final product. Now, going along with that, you might lose some control over things like your brand consistency, your customers' experience, if you're using contractors for that portion of it. So those are some things to consider. We'll talk about how those things can be controlled better when you have employees, but for contractors, you don't technically get that kind of control. It's more about looking at what the final product is instead of the process they go through. So let's talk a little bit about the strategies of having a contractor. First, get a W-9 from that contractor before you pay them, because that W-9, that gives you the tax information you need to when you later have to file a 1099 to the IRS. It's harder to get a 1099 from a contractor after you've discontinued the relationship or the time frame is ended or anything like that. Much harder. It's much easier to get that W-9 at the start of your working relationship and before you pay them. Also, another strategy, have a written contract that goes over the scope and the output you'd like to see from that contractor. What is the final product? What will be approved or not approved for payment, etc. So those are things to consider. Now, overall, a contractor is generally cheaper for a business than an employee. You might be paying the contractor more, but because of the payroll taxes, it's generally cheaper for a company, a business, to use a contractor. And we'll talk a little bit more about the differences and what would make you choose between a contractor or an employee at the end. But I wanted to lay out the pros and cons first. So let's talk about employees now. W-2 employees. You know what these are. Most likely you've been an employee at some point in your history as well. You know, you get a paycheck, you expect that paycheck on time, 2 weeks, bi-monthly, once a month, whatever it is, but you know it's coming and you know what your responsibilities to earn that paycheck are. So let's talk about the employee and pros and cons of having employees for your business. First, a pro, when you have employees, you have control over the process. You control everything that employee does in the performance of that service. Unlike a contractor, when you have an employee, you have control over how the work is done, the quality of it, before a final product or a finished result is available to you. Having employees builds loyalty and team culture. Having employees makes the business eligible for more deductions. Things like benefits that you pay to your employees, retirement contributions, etc., health insurance payments for your employees, those are all tax deductible for you. So that's a benefit there. Some of the cons, the negative sides of employees, they kind of mirror the contractor's pro side. When you have an employee, you are paying payroll tax. The employer's part is 7.65% for the federal stuff, plus all the state stuff. Unemployment insurance, short-term disability insurance, etc. All those things are expenses the company will need to pay to have the privilege of having an employee. Also, when you have an employee, the administrative burden goes way up. You remember with a contractor, all you have to do is pay them and at the end of the year send a 1099 to them and the IRS. For an employee, you're filing quarterly reports, you're submitting their regular paychecks with all the proper tax withholdings and benefits accrued for, and at the end of the year, you're finally submitting to them the W-2s and making some final year-end tax payments for that payroll. So administratively, employees are much more expensive and more difficult. So those are things to consider. Again, it really comes down to the balance of where your business is at and what it's looking for to decide if it's time for a contractor or an employee. So let's some of the strategies you can have when you have employees. Now these are a little bit important, but you are paying more taxes, your payroll tax, your benefits, anything like that. You are paying those. But for the business, those are tax deductible. You still get the tax benefit, decreasing your taxable income. So that's important to remember. Again, that's one thing that comes with the benefit of tracking these kinds of expenses through your bookkeeping software or your payroll software, whatever you're using. Another thing to consider is, depending on the size of your business, you might find it's time to make that change from an LLC to an S Corp. We talked about that in a prior video, so we won't go into it. But an S Corp, when you have an S Corp, there are additional benefits for having employees, including you, the owner. So that's another thing to consider as one of the strategies for having employees. Now it comes down to deciding what kind of costs and benefits are you weighing for having an employee and a contractor? Well, it depends. Depends where your business is at. Depends what your projections and your growth is expected to be. So let's talk about that. Are you are you expecting the business yourself and the need to be long term? Do you need someone there for months, years, etc.? Then you're going to be happier with an employee. I like to use the term sticky and slippy when we talk about employees and contractors. Employees are very sticky for all the benefits and negatives of that. An employee is very sticky to their business. A contractor is slippy. It's easy to hire a contractor, let a contractor go, etc. That's easy. So they're slippy. Employees are sticky on the contrary of that, but you want someone who's sticky when you're looking at the long-term progress or you have a long-term need. That's when you might want an employee. Have a short-term need, maybe you're just hiring maybe you just need someone to do some supervision for one of your pre-licensed therapists or something else that's small and short-term. Contractors are great. They're slippy, like I said. Now, if you are still having questions on whether someone you want to hire and the role you want to fill would be a contractor or an employee, there's some resources out there that can help you answer this question. I like to go by the 3 common law definitions or requirements for the difference between contractor and employee. And these are the behavioral tasks, the financial tasks, and the type of relationship you have with that worker. Behavioral, who is controlling when and how that person works? More control means they're an employee, less control means they're a contractor. So first is behavioral, who's controlling them. Second is financial, how structured and regular is the payment of them? Are they paying regularly a fixed amount or an hourly wage every 2 weeks? Or are they being paid a preset determined amount when a job is completed? Far more up in the air, you can see. Also with that financial side goes the question of who is purchasing and providing supplies and tools and things like that. So again, with the financial, more structure, more control, that's an employee. Less of that is a contractor. And lastly, what's the type of relationship? Going back to that whole sticky and slippy concept I like, is this person tied into your company more, or are they less tied into your company? Going along with that, I'm sure you know and everyone recognizes that when you're an employee of a place, you are an employee of one place. You're not working multiple, well, I guess you could, but the concept is usually you're working for one person, one business at a time. The flip side for a contractor, you could be working for multiple people and there is no problem with that. You could be working at multiple therapists' office doing supervision, doing some consulting work for them on a limited basis, doing administrative work for them, marketing work for them, anything like that. But how do you define that relationship? Is it open or is it fixed and limited? So those are things to think about. If you're still unsure, there's a couple resources out there you can review. The IRS has a 20-factor test. That's a lot of questions, but they have a test out there you can review to kind of gauge whether you have an employee or a contractor. There's also the Form SS8, which goes through many of those questions that I just laid out, the behavioral, financial, and relationship type, to help you define if you have an employee or a contractor. Now, that's not a question you want to get wrong. If you have a worker who you call a contractor, but their role is much more aligned with being an employee, but you're paying them like a contractor and having a cheaper, less expensive deduction on your tax return, and paying them less. If the IRS questions that, they can reclassify that person as an employee, charge you all of the back payroll taxes, and also assess penalties. So this is a decision you don't want to get wrong. Usually it's pretty cut and dry, black and white, easy to tell, but sometimes there's a gray area. When there is a gray area and you don't know if you've got an employee or a contractor, talk with your tax professional, see what they say, see what kind of things can be done to make it more clear on that distinction. The last key, the last clue is be consistent on how you classify and treat your employees or contractors. Consistency lends a lot of weight to whatever you're doing. I won't go into that anymore because that's a long conversation, but basically just be consistent, document what you're doing, and if there is ever any question if you have on being a contractor or an employee, that will help with your case. Now, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, go ahead and comment below, go ahead and DM me. I'll respond when I'm able to answer your questions. If you would like to schedule a 30-minute discovery call with my firm where myself or someone here can talk with you and go over your firm's needs, go ahead and DM me and we'll send you a link. You can get on our calendar for that free 30-minute call. Go ahead and follow us, like, subscribe, whatever the right term is, and visit our website, latercpa.com. I will see you on the next video. Have a great weekend and keep helping others to help themselves. Bye-bye.